everyone, Alexa Dunn here, and today I am going over the pros and cons of using a pen name or a pseudonym. You'll hear it used both ways, but I say pen name because it is easier to spell. So first off, you might not know this, but now you do. I use a pen name. Alexa Dunn is not my IRL legal name, it is my pen name. Now I've got a whole video on why I decided to use a pen name and specifically Alexa Dunn, and I will link that down below if it is already up, if it goes up before this one, but if it doesn't, look for it very, very soon. You are like right inside the mind of like a YouTuber who films videos ahead of time and then figures out their schedule. But back to pen names. So let's start with the pros, which are essentially some reasons that people might decide to use a pen name. So one pro is that you can pick something that is appropriate for your genre. So what I mean by that is if you look at books, and it's a bigger deal in some genres versus others, you might start to see name trends. Probably the best example of this is romance. Have you noticed that all romance names kind of have like this like almost like sensational, sexy, feminine, mysterious tone almost, that there's a ring to the names. They'll have really feminine and almost very enticing first names and then short, sweet, or punny last names. And for this reason, a lot of romance writers, a lot of those authors are pen names. Because most people are just not born with names like Danielle Steele, and I will have to look up whether that is her real name or if it was a pen name. I don't know it off the top of my head, but that's a great example of a romance name. Or like Tessa Dare, that's an amazing romance name, and that is a pen name, I do know that. So romance is a really great example. Another, genre where you see it is kidlit, middle grade, and YA. And in these, you'll see things like J.K. Rowling, for example. That's an example of someone who purposefully obscured their gender for their pen name in order to be more broadly appealing to boys, which we will talk more about in just a minute. I'm not throwing that under the pros column, but under the kind of neutral column, because I do have a middle ground between pros and cons, i.e. reasons you might use a pen name that are a little bit sticky. But coming back to that. So you'll notice this trend when you're looking at certain genres, and if you're planning to write in a genre, you'll have a sense of whether or not your real name is going to work in that genre. Now, regardless, even if you have a real name that will work, you might have some other reasons you might want to use a pen name. So, other pros. So, to tie in with the whole genre thing or preferences, by choosing a pen name, you can control your branding. Another thing that dovetails with this, another pro, is you can pick a name that isn't already taken essentially. There's no authors with either the exact name or a similar name, or really any person or personality with the same or similar name, so you can get the URL that you want. This will enable you to get alexadunn.com. That one's mine. And while my IRL name, I could have gotten the URL for it. In fact, I do own the URL for it. That's not the reason I used a pen name. Again, you can watch my whole video on it. But let's say your name is Jane Smith. You are not going to be able to get janesmith.com. You might not even be able to get Jane Smith author or janesmithbooks.com if there is an author or writer who already has that name. This comes up with certain names that are simply a bit more common. Or you might end up like, what if you have a name that's really, really similar to someone who's super famous, either in the book world or outside of it? You may elect to have a pen name. Another pro to using a pen name is simply protecting your real identity. Sometimes you want to. You don't want people to be able to Google you or throw you into another search engine and come up with your real job or your real street address. There's so many reasons to use a pen name, and one big one is protecting yourself. You can do this for specific reasons. Maybe you're writing in a genre where you don't want everyone to know. I know this happens and comes up often with romance and beyond romance, erotica. There's good reason to obscure your identity in those cases. Not because there's any shame in the genres, by the way. I love those genres, but I don't think it takes too much to jump to why someone might want to use a pen name in those cases. It might also just be that you want to keep your writing career separate and private. That's a perfectly good reason to use a pen name. And about controlling branding and the genre thing, so sometimes you want to and need to pick something that does fit into the genre, because if you don't fit in some cases, it's just gonna be off to readers, and it can hurt your career to have the wrong name. Oh God, that sounds so prescriptive. You don't have to change your name if you don't have like the perfect romance name, but it is recommended. Another pro, kind of a minor pro, you might have heard this, you might have not, and that is that it is not advised when you sign books that you use your legal signature because of concern about possible identity theft, people cloning your signature. So it's generally advised that an author sign differently when they're signing a book. And if you use a pen name, your signature is definitely not going to match your legal signature. So that's just like a micro pro if you happen to choose to use a pen name. I wouldn't use that as a reason to use your pen name because it's, with your IRL name, it's as simple as changing the way you do signatures for books. It's not that hard, but just wanted to throw that in there. Another pro to using a pen name is that in controlling your branding, part of that will be choosing a name that is unique, easy to spell, and easy to remember. Tessa Dare is easy to spell, unique, and easy to remember. It is a great pen name. Frankly, so is J.K. Rowling. I mean, obviously she sticks for us because she's mega famous, of course she is, and Joanne Rowling would have been a perfectly fine pen name, well, real name, as well. But I don't know, certain names just have a good ring to them and they don't sound like anyone else, and so authors will go, ah, that is so-and-so, and it's just a really easy way to be memorable. Now, about easy to spell and pronounce. This is going to bring us into our neutral area as well, because this kind of brings up the question of, if you have, let's say, culturally specific name, this is when it most often comes up, should you change your name? Should you use a pen name to make it easier for other people? Now, I think the answer is no, most of the time. Especially if, you know what, that's your name, you like your name, you are proud of your culture, and you don't think there's any, you don't think it's that hard, and frankly, people should break out of their bubbles and their biases and learn to pronounce things correctly. I fall in that camp, actually. A lot of names that people say, oh, that's hard, I don't find hard to pronounce at all, and so I fully support authors who, stick to their guns and don't choose a pen name just to make it easier for other people. But also, circling back to, choosing a pen name is always going to be a personal choice. And if it is your personal choice to use a pen name because you do have a trickier last name and, you know that people are going to butcher it and spell it wrong, it is completely fine to make the choice to use a pen name. You are not insulting your culture or spitting in people's faces if you make that personal choice. But on the same token, don't enforce that idea onto other people. I think that people should always have the free will. They shouldn't be asked by their agents or their editors or, pressured by friends or readers to change their name just because it's difficult. I fall on the side of, I did make the personal choice of having a more difficult last name that I don't actually think is difficult, but it's in my video. I did make the personal choice though to pick something that was short, sweet, easier to spell and pronounce, though I had other reasons as well. But meaning I understand both sides. I made the decision myself, but I also fully support my friends who are keeping their real names, or even purposely electing, you can do this too, purposely electing to use a pen name that reflects and represents your culture. I fully support that, and I actually think we should do more and more of that in order to challenge, well, readers, but also just people in general, especially in the US, because I think it's about darn time we get out of our comfort zone and start getting more, start getting used to having to learn about other people's freaking cultures and nomenclature and learn how to pronounce people's names correctly. I think it's insulting and a cop-out. So that's the neutral area of pen names or real names and them being difficult to spell or pronounce. It is a personal choice, but in the pros column, if it is something that you're worried about, that might be a reason to use a pen name. And last but certainly not least, and this falls under the unique brand genre category, if you choose a name, a pen name that no one already has, you can cultivate your Google results, as I like to say. It means that if no one's using that name currently to do anything like what you are doing, when someone searches your author name, they will get a beautiful page of Google results and will have no problem finding the relevant links that will take them to you, the author. Whereas if you have a more common name, they might get really messy Google results, or if you use your real name, they'll get personal Google results. It's not a must thing, but it can definitely be a pro if you are interested in cultivating your internet search results. Now back to that murky middle, that neutral zone, and gender. So it is, again, a very personal choice if you want to or need to obscure your gender by using a pen name. While it can absolutely be a pro in certain genres, that it can be a boon to you, you should not feel obligated to obscure your gender, because sometimes it is really upsetting to think, so what, boys aren't gonna buy my book because I'm obviously a woman? And stick to your guns if you don't like that. But I do warn you that in some genres, obscuring your gender is the best decision. And this actually goes both ways. There are definitely men who write romance who use female pen names. And most often women using male pen names will happen, or gender neutral pen names is actually how I should say it. They're gender neutral when you see initials, for example. You're mostly gonna see that in middle grade, sometimes younger, but also in adult literature, because adult fic, adult literary fic, spec fic has a whole host of gender issues unto themselves that I don't even have time to get into. But speaking just, you know, the genres I'm more familiar with, romance, it would often make sense to pick either a gender neutral or an obviously female pen name, and then for middle grade to pick a neutral or kind of not completely obvious pen name if you are writing a middle grade that would be marketed more to boys. I don't like this. I don't like the whole gender binary bullshit, but that is something to be aware of when it comes to pen names and the market. And I will say I see things changing. I think that if J.K. Rowling were publishing Harry Potter now, I don't think it would be as big a deal if her book said Joanne Rowling. So I feel we have made some progress, but it is what it is. Now on to the cons of using a pen name. These are some potential cons of using a pen name. The first one just being, it can be really weird not going by your real name, because you know, we walk through so much of our lives you know with our legal names or the names that people call us in our lives, and then you invent this new person for your book career and people are calling you by the name, especially if you don't use your same first name. I do use my real first name, so it's not too jarring to be called Alexa, because I am Alexa, but you know, every once in a while I hear the Donne, I go, that is my name now, isn't it? Okay. It can be weird, it can just be weird to have people calling you a completely different name, especially if you use a different first name, or if you're using initials and you're not used to that normally. But I will say you do get used to it. Another con is simply that people don't know who you are in your real life, meaning if you want those bragging rights, if you want people from high school to know that you published a book, well, they're not really gonna know if you're not using your real name, if you're kind of really keeping those lives and identities separate. It's kind of a minor thing, but if you want everyone to know that you wrote a book and someone is publishing it, using your real name has real advantages there, because you can brag. Another little thing that might be a con to using a pen name is your parents and family might be a bit sad or even insulted that you didn't use your real name. Like, what, your real name isn't good enough, or you don't like the name that we gave you, or you're ashamed of us. That's kind of an extreme reaction, but there might legitimately be hurt feelings is all I'm trying to say, especially if your family, if the laymen in your life don't know the publishing industry, or like think the whole idea of branding yourself is a bit bonkers, and it is a bit bonkers, let's be honest, but people can really chafe against you using a pen name and just not understand why you're doing it. Again, I don't think it's a huge con. I mean, I don't think it's gonna cause falling out with a family, but that's definitely something that I would put on the cons list. The next con is simply that it can take a lot of work. You basically have to create from almost scratch a whole other person, a whole other online footprint, a whole other identity, social media profiles. If you are keeping them divided and you're still maintaining both, it's a lot of work. And especially with your pen name, because you are starting from scratch, there are pros and cons to that. When you're starting from scratch, there's a lot of work to do in terms of building your social footprint and your Google results and all of that jazz. It's just a lot of work to create a pen name brand. Now that said, you can you can convert IRL social handles into pen names. I have done that. It's not the end of the world, but it is just a little bit of work. And related to that, another con is just it can be confusing even internally within the industry. So I have a pen name and I have my pen name on all of my external social media profiles, but I don't have an author Facebook page, and I still have my personal IRL Facebook page, and I've joined a bunch of author groups using that name. And when people look at it, they don't know who I am, although I do try to make it easy. I use my author headshot on my personal page because I like it, you know. I worked real hard for that shot. And maybe they'll go, oh, that's so-and-so, but it can lead to a little bit of confusion. Again, I think that's a minor con, but it is something that definitely comes up, the complication of two identities, two lives, and kind of keeping them separate, but also seeing where they dovetail and get a bit confusing. The next one is, again, kind of a minor one, but something worth mentioning. It can get complicated with booking things. Now, when you use a pen name, your agent will know your legal name, your publisher will know your legal name, because all of your contracts and whatnot are going to be in your legal name. But it can get confusing. I have had situations where people in my life who only know author Alexa genuinely think that Alexa Donne is my real name and my legal name. And I have had hotel rooms booked under the wrong name, not by my publisher, they know my legal name, but in other situations. And I have shown up to a hotel and I've been unable to check in because I do not have legal identification that says Alexa Donne on it. So that is something that can definitely happen. But I don't think I'm the only one that has happened to. Again, it's not like a huge problem, but it's definitely something to think about. And kind of on the same level as that, you can just end up really confusing people who do know you IRL, who knew you before, who are now like, wait, what do I call you? Now I will say, if any of you have been in fandoms, you may be completely used to this. I think the reason I didn't really have much of a problem transitioning into a pen name is I was using a fake name for many, many years in Harry Potter fandom, and I got very used to people calling me by another name. I mean, there are people from Harry Potter fandom to this day do not know that Alexa is my name, and I'm fine with that. They called me something else for like 8 years, so I think I'm just kind of used to it. But I will say there's a cognitive dissonance when you're using a pen name of like being this other person. Now, to kind of cycle back around to pros though, this can also be a pro. And this is worth a whole other video, but there's something called the author persona. The person that you are when you are an author, that you project yourself to be and that you live on social media. And there are many authors who I respect and admire who give excellent advice on this, of that the way to stay sane when you go into the industry and you get a book deal and you're balancing the bizarre idea of having fans, which I still haven't quite come to grips with, of having an author persona. It's you, but it's a different version of you, and that you can use that to kind of protect your private self so that it's a little less messy. You get less kind of sucked in and emotionally involved in some of the things that can happen with the line of like author-reader interaction and so on. And having a pen name can really help that, because you doubly feel like it's a version of yourself, a persona, because it's not even your real name. Like Alexa Donne is a lot author Alexa. It's another version of myself, and it does feel completely separate from Alexa IRL last name, and I like that. So, you know, I'm leaning heavy on the pros here. And that's only because if you think you want to use a pen name, what you really want to hear are the reasons that you could or should use a pen name. If you don't want to use the pen name, you don't even care anyway, so the pros and cons aren't really particularly valuable to you. So really, those are just some of the pros, cons, neutrals, and essentially reasons why some people may need to or choose to use a pseudonym in their author career. I'm entirely sure I have skipped something, that I've missed something, so drop any questions you have about using a pen name, pros, cons, anything I mentioned but didn't go into detail about, down below in the comments, and I will endeavor to answer it as best as I can. If you liked this video, I would appreciate a thumbs up. It lets me know that you want to see more content like this, the kind of how-tos and coulda, woulda, shouldas of publishing. I like making these videos, so I'll probably make more anyway, but a thumbs up is always appreciated. By the same token, if you are already subscribed to the channel, thank you, I love you, and if you're not, go ahead and subscribe. I post new videos 2 to 3 times a week all about YA, writing craft, the industry, and specifically traditional publishing, since that is the bulk of my experience. And thank you so much for watching, and as always, happy writing, everyone.